Cheers.
Cheers. Welcome to Culture Night,
where each week we drink fancy wine and watch movies that are in some way culturally significant. I'm Andrew.
And I'm Sarah. And we're here for episode 10.
Oh, man.
Woo!
Double digits.
I know. I thought we'd make it this far, but it's just exciting to be here.
Yeah. Feels like it's gone by really fast. I feel like we just started this podcast and we're already on double digits.
Again, thank you to anybody that's listening, watching, liking, subscribing, rating, reviewing, all the things. If you haven't liked, subscribed, rated, or reviewed, what better time than episode 10?
Yeah. And for anyone who's watching on or listening on Google Podcast, there's something kind of messy going on there where it's combined this podcast with one of a similar name. I don't really know what's going on there because the episodes appear to be ours, but it doesn't have all of them, but the logo's messed up. So you can go ahead and review it if you want. I don't know if it'll actually count towards us.
Mm-hmm. And we'll try to look into it.
I guess it was last week that you finally added the support for YouTube
podcast.
So if anyone has that on app update, then you should be able to listen to our podcast there as well.
And we're all the places.
All the business we have this week.
Mm-hmm. And now we will go back into our Slept On It segment for Ferris Bueller's Day Off from last week. And we will start off with, does your rating change after sleeping on it? You gave it a 7.8 last week.
I think that feels about right. I don't know if it's quite in the 8 range, but I think 7.8. If anything, maybe 7.9, but 7.8 sounds about right. How about you?
Yeah, I gave it a 7.2 and I feel good about the 7.2. Mm-hmm. Would I watch it if it was on TV? Absolutely.
Mm-hmm. Quotable.
Lots
of memes from it.
Yep. Just a good cult classic, but not quite in the 8s.
It was YouTube before YouTube.
It was
very
YouTube.
Culturally significant.
And so now I have a couple deep dives.
Speaking of the YouTube aspect.
Yes. So first of all, I was going to look into the breaking of the fourth wall. We kind of talked about it last week with, was that really common before this? Mm-hmm. And to be honest, I started looking into it and there's a lot of information out there on breaking the fourth wall. And it seems to be something that is fairly common in film, theater,
I feel like
TV.
Happened obviously first in theater. And I think it was probably really common in the really old
and plays. It goes way, way back. And apparently it wasn't really called that at the time. And it was, now it's more of like a comedic thing to break the fourth wall. It's most often seen in comedy, whereas I don't think that was as much the case before.
Yeah, I can't really imagine it in a very serious role. Like now I feel like it only can be used for comedic purposes.
For sure. So I didn't really go too deep into the fourth wall, but it's a common thing. I think it's getting more common, especially in the comedy aspect.
Yeah. Now it's just called being meta.
Oh, God. You're not wrong. And then the other thing that I looked into is I mentioned last week that the parade scene for Ferris Bueller was they just kind of happened upon the parade. Mm-hmm. And so I looked into that a little bit more. And according to this website, Xfinity.com had a behind the scenes about the movie. And according to their article about it, by sheer coincidence, the Ferris Bueller's Day Off crew was scheduled to film their parade scene at the same time as the real-life Von Steuben Day Parade in Chicago. In fact, the Ferris Bueller's Day Off cast and crew inserted their own float into the lineup without asking for permission.
Oh, wow.
So they just completely happened upon this parade.
Yeah, but they happened to have a float?
I think they were going to shoot their parade that day, and there also happened to be a real parade when they were planning.
So that parade was not the parade that was happening wasn't the one they were going to act in the movie. Mm-hmm. Okay. I thought it was just kind of like a plot line they wrote into the movie by chance, and then it happened to turn into all that. And I was like, that seems like a lot to kind of last minute be like, oh yeah, and then he's going to sing, and then No, they were already planning to do a parade. They stumbled upon a real parade and just kind of threw themselves in there and made a movie scene. Yeah. I wonder what day of the week it was on.
Because I imagine it would have to have really been a weekend.
Yeah, because I was going to be surprised if it actually was like a weekday parade, like they kind of portrayed the movie, which
because we both still can't get over that.
Very impractical. I'd be very angry if I was a driver.
For sure, in a downtown major city. Mm-hmm. And then while looking for the parade scene information, I did find some other fun facts about the movie that I wanted to share really quick because I thought they were really interesting. So, kind of also going back to something we talked about last week, you asked if Tom Cruise had been considered for the role or wanted the role or whatever. Mm-hmm. And according to the same Xfinity behind the scenes website, that it was a really popular role and a lot of people really were interested in it. And those people whose names were in the hat or were really interested for it were Rob Lowe, John Cusack, Jim Carrey, Johnny Depp, Tom Cruise, Robert Downey Jr., and Michael J. Fox.
I read something similar along that Tom Cruise wasn't really strongly in consideration because he hadn't really had his breakout role of Top Gun. That's when he like really kind of launched into being the big movie star that he is. But that if he had somehow landed this role, that the alternates for Top Gun were Patrick Swayze and I think Michael J. Fox.
No.
Yeah.
I mean, I could see Michael J. Fox for Ferris Bueller's Day Off. I think it shook out the way it needed to.
Yeah.
But I thought that was interesting because you had mentioned that last week. And then also apparently love was in the air on the set behind the scenes.
Oh.
And that Matthew Broderick and Jennifer Grey, who played brother and sister on the movie, dated and got engaged just before the theatrical release of the movie. Obviously didn't work out long term, but
interesting
romance behind the scenes.
Yeah, a little bit incest on the set.
And also the actor and actress who played their parents, Cindy Pickett and Lehman Ward, met on set, got married, and had 2 children.
Crazy.
So I wonder if they named them Ferris and Jeannie.
Great names.
Yes, but sadly they also got divorced in 1992. So
not true love.
Yes, and then one last fun fact is that Charlie Sheen is apparently a very method actor, and apparently he stayed up for 48 hours before shooting his scenes in the movie.
Sure looked like it.
So that he could really portray the strung out druggie in the police station. So he just stayed up for 2 straight days.
Or he could have just done some drugs, but maybe that's his cover. Is like, I stayed up for 2 days. Or maybe he stayed up for 2 days because he was on drugs.
You never know. But those were just some fun facts. There was a couple more in there, but I thought those were the most interesting. So cool. Great movie. And now we're ready for this week. Mm-hmm. What are we drinking?
This week we are drinking the 2015 Tobin James 5.
Yes, we had to bring back another 5 for episode 10. And can you read us the grapes on the back?
It's, the Cabernet Sauvignon, 22%. It's 21% Cab Franc, 20% Petit Verdot, 19% Merlot, and 18% Malbec. So I'd like to compare that to the ratio from our last 5 episodes ago. But yeah, a lot of good grapes there. Let's check it out.
It smells very spicy on the nose.
Yeah, it feels a little alcohol forward.
Mm-hmm. It smells like Christmas or like wintertime, cozy and winter vibes.
I get like some floral notes from it.
I don't know. I get Christmas.
Okay, I'm getting more of that now that the
earthy
alcohol part's kind of subsided. Yeah. Oh, I get a lot more of that spice. Yeah.
Mm-hmm. It is a little alcohol-y, and I'll be interested to see if once we let it sit a little bit longer and do the fancy twirl and air it out a little bit more, if that kind of dissipates a little bit. But I do like it.
A little bit of red Skittle there. We're very refined palate wine drinkers.
I don't think I get the red Skittle, but I like it. Mm-hmm. I like it a lot, actually. So far, 5s are just proving to be very great wines.
All right.
And then what are we watching tonight?
This week we are watching The Breakfast Club from 1985.
Almost in the same year again, but back a year.
It is rated R. So,
which surprised
expecting
me.
Lots and lots of boobs, lots of swearing, lots of everything. If we know what PG was at the time, this has got to be the X rated.
And also, just like last week, was Ferris Bueller was PG-13. That I don't know. I was really alarmed when I looked this up and saw that it was R. And I've seen it before. Jumping ahead, spoiler alert. That I don't really know why it's R, but I'll be interested to be paying attention.
So I've definitely seen it before and seen it on TV multiple times, but I'm wondering if I've ever seen it like not the TV version before. Because one scene that I remember that I don't know if it's actually what he says or if it's just the TV bad dub, where at one point, forget the character's name, is yelling at the principal. He's yelling, "Eat my shorts," which sounds like a really weird thing to yell at someone, especially in an R-rated movie, that I'm interested to see if that's actually what he yells or if that's what the TV version was.
Yeah, I don't know. We'll find out.
There's a lot of like fun like memes of like movies that have like really bad dubs, but that one always stuck with me. But take us back into 1985. The top 3 movies released that year were Back to the Future, speaking of Michael J. Fox, grossing $190 million. Beverly Hills Cop, grossing 157 million, and Rambo: First Blood Part 2 at 150 million. And the top 3 songs of the year were Careless Whisper by Wham, Like a Virgin by Madonna, and Wake Me Up Before You Go Go by Wham as well.
So. I know 2 of those 3 songs.
Yeah. Starting to get some more familiar songs as we're getting closer to
our time.
Our era.
Back to Have You Seen It Before? I just want to say that I saw it. So I have seen it before. I've seen it probably a handful of times. I'm not super familiar because it has been a while now since I've seen it. But the first time I ever saw it was when I was in college. I had to watch this for a class. I was a human development major in college. And so I believe it was like the class was called Middle Childhood and Adolescence, I think is what it was called. And we had to watch a bunch of teen drama movies or drama comedy movies and like analyze them for like different teen stereotypes and like teen behaviors.
Do you happen to have that paper or whatever report you gave for this?
Honestly, I probably do.
It might be fun to include next week.
Deep dive for next week. I will find whatever I did because
analytical paper.
I definitely still have my old college laptop, which still has everything on it. So, I was excited remembering watching it for the first time. Like I remember being in my like dorm bed and I don't know how we got copies or access to it, but we had to watch this and Twilight, which I was so mad about because I've never seen Twilight or read any of the Twilight books, but we read The Breakfast Club and I was like, oh, I'm finally watching a movie I've always felt like I need to see. So nice. I'm excited
Can't wait to see what your college perspective on the movie was and see if it changed.
Especially because then I was much closer to being like a high school teenager than I am now, that just to read that and just to watch it again now as an adult and see how those compare.
Yeah.
Ooh, we'll see how it all shakes out. And what do you know? What are your expectations? Anything we want to put out there? I mean, we've seen it before.
So I'm excited to kind of jump into it and watch it.
Yeah.
So give our review. All right.
Yeah. Ready to drink some more wine. That's for sure. Because this is delicious.
Let's go.
Jump into Breakfast Club.
So that was the Breakfast Club.
All right.
And
ready?
Yeah.
Start with our wine.
Yeah. Wine scale. I'm going to give it a. So let's describe the wine scale first. It is 0 to 10, and it's not necessarily like 0 being crop water. It's like 0 is like we're already assuming it's a pretty good wine. 10 being like it's like nectar of the gods. I'm going to give it a 5.2.
I had it at 7.3.
Mine is mainly because of just the amount of sediment we had in ours.
And that happened for me for some other wine, so I can appreciate it. Your sediment was worse than mine.
Flavor wise, like if we take out the sediment, I'll give it a 6.6. It was good. Also, flavor wise, wine itself, good. I don't have too much to say about it, honest. I just was really off put by the sediment.
I mean, I will say I'm like a little scared to say 6.8, 6.9 because that's my range apparently. I liked the spicy earthiness of it, but it was a little alcohol forward and a little sedimenty. I think that's a little bit because of its age being 2014, but overall
probably our fault for storage and everything and not like filtering it before we poured it. But
I did very much enjoy the whole bottle. Good, delicious.
Tobin James 5, 2014.
We love you, Teach.
Movie rating out of 10.
Do we go first?
Yes.
7.5.
Yeah, I'm still thinking. I'm still like around the 6.7. Obviously, like it's a very iconic movie. I've seen it before. I just thought there was a lot more. It felt kind of dragged out.
Yes, I can appreciate that.
Move slowly. I mean, obviously, it's a movie about a bunch of kids in a library, so like it's going to be kind of slow. I obviously would watch a lot of it if it would just happen to be on TV. It's not super quotable, but there are like a lot of memorable scenes from it. But yeah,
I really like it. And
it's a very comfortable movie. I don't know. There's something like not nostalgic, but just like.
And I think that's how I felt about Ferris Bueller too. I've seen this more than I've seen Ferris Bueller, but just something about it was just like, this just feels nice. And I think I appreciate why this was so popular in the 80s. And I feel like, although like the clothes and the language of how they like talk to each other and stuff is probably very 80s and outdated from what it is today. But I think that like so much of the overarching story is so applicable through the generations, and you kind of identify with one person or another, or a couple parts of a couple of different people. And I just feel so much of that when I watch it.
I think there's like a familiar feeling about pretty much all the characters in it, even the teacher and the janitor, like everyone, you just kind of feel related. You feel like you can relate to all of them.
Yeah. I don't know. It leaves me with a good feeling, as like heavy as some of it is. Just, I don't know. Every time I watch it, I'm always like, this is a really good movie. So 7.5 for me.
Yeah. So let's move on to the Wikipedia description.
Yes.
I will go first.
We really need to change our thing to not say Wikipedia description, because we don't read Wikipedia.
What's our gist?
You give a gist.
Andrew's synopsis versus TV screen's synopsis.
Yes.
It's a coming of age film. It's a bunch of kids in a library that unite despite their differences and reveal some truths about themselves after letting their guard down, and find that they have more in common than they thought.
Excellent. You always do such a good job. I'm sorry we always put you on the spot for that.
I practice all week.
But you always come with a really succinct.
No, I'm actually practicing for the podcast.
Oh, I love that. Okay, according to the description that's up here, it says 5 high school students from different walks of life endure a Saturday detention under a power-hungry principal. The disparate. You said it right both times. I don't think there's really a wrong way to say it, but I'm sure you'll find one. Okay. Now I gotta start laughing. The disparate group includes Rebel John, Princess Claire, Outcast Allison, Brainy Brian, and Andrew the Jock.
I thought I was just going to say, and Andrew.
This is so far the best description we've had so far.
And Andrew.
And Andrew
I feel
the Jock.
seen. Not as the jock, just the and Andrew.
Each has a chance to tell his or her... I always have such a hard time reading this, but this one's the hardest. Okay. Each has a chance to tell his or her story, making the others see them a little differently. And when the day ends, the question whether... ...
Stay tuned.
We'll never know.
Find out on next episode. Yeah. I mean, I didn't get as quite as artsy in the description, but... This
is always more artsy and more descriptive than yours. I feel like you give the really succinct,
I like to get
quality.
To the heart of it.
Yeah. How well I got excited. I jumped at. Was the movie what you expected?
Yes, having seen it.
Yes, for sure.
If you just told me the title of it, not at all. I would expect, like, the first time I heard of The Breakfast Club, I assumed it was like some kids, like, I don't know, talk show type thing, or...
I mean, this a little skips ahead to did they say the title, does it fit, etc. They don't say it, but I almost wish they did in some kind of...
Oh, they do.
They do?
Yeah, they sign off. Say, signed, The Breakfast Club.
Okay, clearly that's when I had already signed. He said signing off or whatever, and I just tuned out.
Credits were already rolling for you. Yes, they do say the title of the movie, but only in the very end, and it honestly doesn't really fit. Not to get to the next part of it, but to get to the next part of it, they kind of force it at the very end. It's almost like they had the title in mind, and maybe they cut out some scenes or some lines or augmented the script, but it just seems like they're all out of nowhere. They're just like, signed The Breakfast Club, the title of the movie.
I mean, according to my light research, I didn't look up what the title meant, but it was based off of what the Saturday detentions were called at John Hughes High School. As they just called it The Breakfast Club. Some kind of lead up into that would have been nice, especially as someone who was not alive when this movie came out and watched it as a college kid in 2010, 2011.
That makes a lot more sense now.
To have some kind of background would be nice, like in the movie. Yeah. And it fits when you know that.
The more I'm looking at the word breakfast now, it's not looking like a word anymore. So, but the fact that he called it The Breakfast Club because that's what it's called at his high school, and apparently that was like a known thing, at least to him, or maybe in the time that's what that was called. Just reminds me of when there was a newspaper article written about my brother, and it was talking about how he joined track team so that he
So casual.
could avoid riding the school bus, or the big cheese as they call it. Like literally no one I've ever heard calls it, but like in the newspaper article, that's what they wrote. It almost feels like that same vibe with the breakfast club, as they called it, detention, or as the kids said, just sure. Maybe someone said it at some point, but
Yeah. And I mean, it's a cool name for Saturday detention. Makes it seem mildly more exciting, but
yeah,
to an outsider, it doesn't really mean a whole lot.
yeah, maybe like the Misfits or Detention or coming of age 80s movie with a bunch of teenagers.
But I also feel like we can't really argue with it because it's such a classic movie.
I've always hated the title though. Always hated it. Just because it just doesn't fit what my mind thinks. But it is a very I feel like everyone knows or has heard of The Breakfast Club at this point. It is what it is, but yeah, I just still don't think it really fits.
Yeah.
But I get it now that you say that.
Yeah. So backtracking a little bit, how well did it age?
I don't know. I mean, well, it aged well. Could it be made today? I think it'd be a lot different. But just because nowadays I feel like you're not allowed to have detention, especially not outside of school in most schools. But if you like took the whole "we're taking your phone" aspect and made kids actually talk, I feel like you could make a remake of it. Other than the fact that nowadays most schools are not going to allow detention, let alone Saturday detentions.
Mm-hmm. I think tweaking some things, it could definitely be made today.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. But yeah.
But I backtracking too, did it age well? I think it was made in the 80s, about the 80s, so it describes that time really well, but it also has such overarching themes of what it's like to be in high school. And yes, being in high school in the 2020s or in the 2000s when we were in high school, or in the 80s, are all different, but there's still the stereotypes, the cliques, like all of that stuff is still a thing.
Yeah.
And it gives you a look into the high school time.
And it felt a lot of like what I kind of sensed from my time in high school, like late 2000s, that there were a lot of like barriers or like defenses set up against or between the various cliques of like, oh, we couldn't possibly talk to them because of this. But like once you actually talked to them, you realize that, most of them have their own insecurities, have their own like things going on, but are actually, at least at my school for the most part, very nice people and very welcoming of anyone who happens to want to talk to you. I don't know if it was the same at your school, but at least from my experience, there was a lot of like, we're this clique, we couldn't possibly talk to them, but then they actually talked to them in class or for some reason realize, hey, actually we're all just kids and it's fine.
Mm-hmm. I mean, high school was weird for me. I like it. The few things that stick out into my mind, because I've completely just forgotten a lot of high school apparently, that like the times that I talked to people that I didn't regularly talk to, like in class or whatever, it was similarly of like, yes, you're a nice person, like we can talk in class, but it was also like this where it's like, are you going to talk to me outside of here? Probably not. That was a lot more the vibe at my school.
Yeah. I guess I never really got that. Maybe I just was oblivious and naive, but for the most part, if I was going to talk to someone in class, I'd also talk to them anywhere I saw them. And there wasn't really any sort of like judgment there, at least in high school. In middle school, there's a lot more of the bullying and the barrier set up, but in high school, it was very much kind of like this of like, hey, you're kind of weird, so I'm not going to talk to you, but once I do finally talk to you, turns out you're okay.
Must be nice. I wish I'd gone literally anywhere else for high school. It's fine. And were there any actors that went on to do bigger things?
Yeah, pretty much all of them.
Mm-hmm. I mean, I feel like this was one of the earlier Brat Pack movies, so they all kind of...
Emilio Estevez might have been in some things. I don't know. Anthony Michael Hall.
Molly Ringwald, who?
Yeah.
I don't know.
Yeah, all of them.
Yeah, pretty good cast.
I mean, the cast was like 7 people total, but...
I know, I was thinking about that when you were talking about about the principal and the janitor, and I was like, God, the cast was like 7 people.
But
I mean, there are a couple
like
parents
movies where it's just very small set. Spoiler alert on one of my notes though is that I felt like this movie very well could or should be a play. Like, especially like in a for a high school to make this play.
Ooh.
Because you could
High
make
schoolers
most of the set
playing it. Oh, I love
is
it.
a single set, maybe a little bit of like, them running through the halls or getting dropped off. But like for the most part, it's a single set and very small cast. It would just be memorizing a lot of lines.
Yes.
But
ooh, yeah, that would be tough.
But I feel like it'd be a really cool play.
For sure. That'd be really cool. I hadn't thought about that. Love that.
Do you think this movie had any impact on pop culture?
I don't know. I don't know about that. For sure.
I mean, starting with the very beginning of the "Don't You Forget About Me," that I feel like is just such an iconic scene of, at the very end is when he raises his fist in the air, but the fact that
the second the beat dropped, I was like, yes.
You're transported back in time. But the fact that the "Don't You Forget About Me" is the title of the John Hughes documentary, like it just, I feel like that song and so much of the scenes in here just encapsulates like that,
time.
The high school vibe, especially shown through the mid 80s. Just, I feel like there's so many movies or shows that like either make like make fun of it or make a reference to it or quote it.
And on that note, I don't know if I actually said this last week, but the Ferris Bueller vanity plates that we were talking about, the sisters was TBC, which was for The Breakfast Club. So there was another reference in a movie, which was reverse ordered, but we'll count that as another movie referenced in another movie.
There was also a vanity plate, the I guess Anthony Michael Hall's family's car was EMC2, so equals MC squared, showing that he's a nerd.
Yeah, I did make a note, like, vanity plate, thinking like, oh, maybe we'll see some more, but then they don't leave
the car you see.
So that's the only car you see. But apparently John Hughes likes to hide those little nuggets in his movies.
Yeah.
Just little fun things. And do you feel cultured after watching it?
No more cultured than I did before because I have seen it, but I feel like you can't say that you've like are a cultured movie person without having seen The Breakfast Club.
I have to say I do feel really proud that I had already seen this going into it, because I just, knowing my history with movies and not seeing popular movies
or having heard of a lot of popular movies.
Okay, Blazing Saddles was an exception. But that I've seen this, and I've seen it multiple times, just makes me like pat on the back for myself that I've seen something that's a big cult classic. And I am glad to have seen it again, especially as an adult, kind of like we were talking about in the before show of, I like thinking back to this paper I wrote in college, how I'll view it differently from what I did when I was 20, 21.
Yeah, I'd like to think more like when I have more than just a couple seconds to process it about what movies about being a teenager would have been like before and after this. I feel like a lot of what they showed was kind of more actually processing being a kid, and as opposed to like just fitting a stereotype. It was more like, hey, you're the jock, you do all these things, but like, why might you do those things? You're the the nerd, you have to be perfect, you have straight A's, but why? Like all of those things. I feel like this might have been one of the first movies to really kind of peel that back.
It almost feels a little bit ahead of its time with how they like almost, Allison sees a shrink, which I feel like is not a word that's used as often anymore, but
or with a very negative connotation.
But she goes to therapy and talks about it.
She says that, but then apparently she says she's a compulsive liar.
Also
so she
true.
Might not have.
But the fact that she even referenced it in the 80s, and just being so self-reflective on who you are seems a lot more ahead of its time than what I typically think of the 80s.
Yeah.
So great movie. Loved it.
All right. On to our notes. Do you want to go first?
Sure. My first note is John Hughes. Did he write it or just direct it?
I think all of them.
All the things.
Yeah. Well, he didn't direct it. It says directed by Jackie Birch, but I'm pretty sure he wrote it.
Okay. So it's a John Hughes influenced movie. It's a classic. He's great. Not really much more to say there, just that we need to acknowledge that he was involved in this movie.
You can definitely feel like his influence on all parts of it.
For sure. I will say I felt it a little bit more last week than I did this week, but still a great movie.
Yeah, I just feel like thinking back to in Ferris Bueller when Cameron is they're watching the stock thing and he's doing those weird like motions, whatever things. I feel that vibe of he just thought that kids just did like weird motions and things. You kind of see that in some of the weird not B-roll but like weird interstitial scenes with them where there's music going on, they're just acting odd.
And I also feel like
His kids are weird, so he's not wrong.
Ferris and his friends were a little introspective of themselves and each other and like why they are the way that they are a little bit more than I typically think of in a teen drama. So maybe that had something to do with him. And then we've talked a little bit about opening credits on movies, and this one was really boring. This, I feel like, was you referenced in one of the podcasts about it was better than just like the boring credit that where they're just like over a blank screen or a blank picture.
Yeah, Top Gun's opening credits way better than this one.
Yeah, this was very boring.
This was just like show something on the screen, black. Show John Hughes, like name, black. Show like starring, black, and it just there was nothing for like just 5 minutes.
Yeah, thumbs down on the
music
opening credits.
Don't You Forget About Me. Like I wasn't going to fast forward through that. And then obviously with most of the credits happening ahead of time and it being a very small cast, not much production, the ending credits were very short.
I feel like even if they had just shown like pictures of the school with the credits in it would have been a little more exciting, but the black and plain text, boring. But not boring was how they ended the credits. Well, they had the quote by David Bowie that I will bring back next week because I didn't write it down. But they have the quote and then it explodes into the screen. And we were just like really hoping that maybe there was like a 3D release of The Breakfast
Club.
Club.
These weird animated like shards of the screen
just exploding out.
I just imagine somebody coming to watch this movie with 3D glasses and be like, this is great. And like that's literally the only 3D part of it.
Yep. It just didn't.
Oh my God, you guys did opening credits. It was so 3D.
And I was like, maybe there'll be something where like this will kind of fit the vibe of the movie. But the more I kept watching, I was like, I don't understand why they needed to explode the quote.
And
off
how
the
much
screen.
of the budget of the movie went to that one animation?
Probably more, more than you would think. Just thought that was funny. And then just Saturday detention. Is that a thing? Was that a thing?
I don't think so. I don't think any teacher or admin wanted to be there to do that. They probably would have just rather you just come in or spend your day in detention on Monday or be expelled. I don't know.
I mean, as a former teacher, you know, I've thought a lot about the education system and stuff, but like, and I know that you want to make it something that's undesirable so that students will behave and like, as a teacher, you're trying to control a lot of children or they're not children, but like, I understand that struggle, but I'm not giving up my Saturday to be at school to watch these kids. And it's 8 hours they were there. 8 hours. That's a full day on a Saturday.
And not just that, but I feel like nowadays parents would be like, no, we already have plans with our kid. So we're not going to send them to detention because we already are planning on going to somewhere. And I feel like the first time that happens, it's like, well, the teacher would have been like, well, we're going to fail them. But then as soon as No Child Left Behind passed and all that sort of stuff, and now kids are just passed on through, you kind of lose that lever. So that admin or teachers would be like, well, we can't do anything if they don't come to detention. So it must have just had to stop. Yeah.
It seemed like, I mean, for an adult, I mean, I also have noted this, Mr. Vice Principal getting paid $31,000 a year. Are you getting paid extra to be there for 8 full hours on a Saturday? If you're not, I'm not giving up 8 hours of my life to sit at school. No way.
Yeah.
Absolutely not.
I don't think that it'd be a good deterrent for some people, but for others, it's just kind of a waste of everyone's time of being like, we're going to waste a Saturday for not just the kid, but also the teachers that have to be there, unless they're like grading papers or we're going to planning on being in there anyways. But it seemed like the vice principal was just killing time, drinking beers on the job. So going through everyone's confidential files. Yeah.
He was not using his time wisely. We talked a lot while we were watching it, just like their outfits. And I think this is just a sign of the style of the 80s and the 90s. It's just a lot of layers. Everybody had on a lot of clothes. And then I forgot I wrote this note down, but then I got really deep at the end. Then they all had their coats back on at the end. And it was like, were they just shedding layers of themselves the longer they were there? That's
the note that I had, was that as you see, as they go on, as they're kind of revealing more about themselves, they're taking off more layers of their clothing towards by the end. There's like,
luckily for them, the 80s was just like, oh, he's wearing 7 shirts. That's fine. But then they could just be real artsy and like make it really deep.
They get in there, they're all self-defensive, not talking to each other, and they've got 19 jackets on. They start kind of taking their jackets off. They kind of realize, oh, I can't expose myself if someone else is. And then by the end, they've taken off. But then they go back outside, and they are now with their parents. They got to be like, oh, I'm so defensive again.
This is some deep stuff here.
Symbolism.
I mean, Emilio Estevez in his tank top, and I don't know what the actress's name, but Allison ends up in the like short sleeve shirt that Molly Ringwald gives her after her
Show
makeover.
her the pretty girl inside.
They've all just shed everything. But even Brian takes his sweatshirt off and just has a t-shirt on with his jacket when he's walking out to the car. So they're all slightly different, but
they've revealed their inner selves.
Yeah, some deep stuff in the Breakfast Club. And then I think this is just a little bit of the fact that I'm parenting a toddler right now, but I've also been a teacher. And just when the principal was just giving detentions to Bender and he was like, I don't care. And it was like, well, that's another one. And he's like, still doesn't care. And just that feeling of like, I need to do something to punish you, but I don't know how, like, what's going to work for you. So I'm going to keep taking stuff away from you. And I just felt that, like, obviously it wasn't working. But I felt that power struggle of being the adult, being like, I need to do something to punish you because your behavior is not acceptable. Yeah, but like I'm so worked up that I can't see this power struggle that I've gotten myself into. So I'm just going to keep dying on this hill that I've gotten myself on.
Yeah, I think it also kind of showed him the principal, like him escalating before he realized that was like the only lever he had to pull was like another week, and he realizes that he has now lost the leverage there, and all he can do is just add more onto that. So it's kind of like that, showing that power struggle of like he wants to do more, but as a teacher he can't really flex anymore on this kid, and he kind of shows like, hey, I actually don't have the authority in the situation besides just the one lever that I have.
And I think this is one of those times where, like, as a teenager or college kid or whatever, when I watched this the first time, I don't know how much I would have appreciated that, but having been like an adult in a situation similar, I mean, obviously not giving out Saturday detentions, but just feeling that like, oh no, I've not pushed myself that far, but understanding a little bit more of where the principal is trying to come from, where he's like probably not as compassionate and trying to be helpful, but he's also trying to have like some order and some control of the chaos, and he's lost that control.
Yeah, I think removing him from the room was the smart move there, as opposed to just continuing escalating, but he just kind of wanted to flex in front of everyone else. But yeah, I think in that situation, it just made him look weak. For sure.
And I think that's how like aging didn't age well, is that we are a lot more aware we try to be a lot more aware as parents and as teachers of what does and doesn't work for certain kids and how to try to help and support those things. He didn't seem like he was
very introspective or that he cared what anyone else might have said there.
Absolutely
he just seemed like he wanted to have it his way. And when someone else pushed back, he didn't really know how to react to that.
For sure. And while watching them run around the school, I was like, this school looks kind of familiar. And a lot of these scenes were shot at the same school that Ferris Bueller was shot at. So there's a little bit of crossover.
At least Ferris Bueller was supposed to take place in John Hughes' like hometown. So that makes sense there.
Yeah. And because their lockers, they had the like rows of lockers on the, like in some hallway. And I was like, when we watched last week, I was like, I've never seen lockers that are just kind of like tucked into like a corner that way. And then they showed up again this week, and I was like, I've made a mental note of these before.
This is what Chicago area lockers must have looked like.
And then I was like trying to figure out, how do I word this in Google so that I get the answer that I want for? And it looks like there was a little bit of crossover there. Brian, easily the funniest character of them all. I laughed out loud more for him than anybody else.
Yeah, he didn't say much at first, but he had more confidence than you would have given him credit for based on how he looks.
And just like his delivery,
he wanted to break out of that shell.
His delivery of a lot of things, and just the way he was as a person and how he just answered questions and stuff was just very comical. And then he gets like really deep and heavy, and you see he's going through a lot of stuff, and just want to like tell him that your grades in high school really don't matter as much as you're led to believe.
He kind of reminded me of me in the beginning, not necessarily just being nerdy, but just being like, I'm going to keep talking even though no one wants to hear what I have to say. And someone's probably going to come like punch me for continuing to talk, but I just think that I'm myself am funny, so I'm just going to keep saying it.
I didn't want to say it because I didn't want it to be perceived as like a put down, but I did kind of
despite this cool, like, rugged man beard I've got going on, I was very small and nerdy back in high school.
Yeah, he definitely gives me some Andrew vibes. And then I'm just a little concerned about my own personal memory, because I've seen this many times before, and I don't remember anything about them smoking weed.
Yeah, me neither.
Okay.
It's been cut from the TV version.
Makes me feel so much better. I don't remember them taking it from his locker.
Hotboxing a room in the library.
And I will say the hotboxing is when it kind of came back to me. But that whole scene, I mean, I remember like them dancing and like all that kind of stuff. I remember that. But the weed just completely gone from my memory.
Just like they kind of like sneaked it and tried to like mask the smell. They like literally hotboxed an entire room, and there was just so much, out in the open smoking the weed that I'm like, there's no way you wouldn't have gotten caught. That would reek and that would smell very strongly.
That was my biggest
anyone that walked in from a mile away. That was the like least believable part about all of it. Like climbing through the whatever ceiling, obviously it doesn't seem super realistic in most places. But they smoking the weed and just not expecting to get caught immediately or
there's
right after.
no way that all that smell would go out before the principal came back.
Because it didn't look like they were making any effort to mask the smell.
And I also just like, would the weed have been a bigger deal in the 80s than it is now?
On school property, I feel like it still would have been a pretty big deal.
Yeah. I just don't know, like, would that still be like the risky thing that they would do?
All that, I don't know. I still feel like it would not have looked good, especially doing that in detention on school property. Still probably would have been a big
valid
big
point.
issue.
And then I also, something I want to look into this week is if this is like I've been struggling with the wording of this, like this style of story where you're like confined with other people and like the truth telling kind of thing. Like, is there like a bigger picture of this?
I know like on TV, it's called like a bottle episode. So I feel like that's the closest terminology I have for everyone kind of being like in a very confined set, just a couple people kind of talking, working through their stuff.
But I feel like also the, like, you're stuck with these people who you clearly don't hang out with in school. And that brings out
like you're stuck in
the truth telling and the like introspection and all that kind of stuff that, watching this, I was thinking of, certain like One Tree Hill episodes and like those like teen dramas that were popular when we were teens, that this has to be some kind of like bigger story. But that's also just like the network wants to save money. We're just going to stay on our main set and not do anything crazy. Yeah,
I don't think this was necessarily done for that. It would seem like it was more done for the movie itself.
But on that same note, does this happen every week when they go to have Saturday detentions? Does every Saturday detention bring out these like...
It's the club every week. Breakfast Club meets.
But like, are these same 5 people in the Breakfast Club every week? Probably not, because I don't think that Molly Ringwald skips school every week to go shopping, and that what's his face Emilio Estevez tapes his butt cheeks together every week to be in detention. That does the different group every week all of a sudden just become this like realized group.
Well, we know at least one person's going to be there for the next 2 months.
Well, yes, Bender will be there.
And they showed in the beginning, everyone or a bunch of people having carved their names into the various places, or at least carved sayings that I think this is just, a glimpse into one instance of the Breakfast Club.
Yes, but does every Breakfast Club bring this like awakening?
100%.
I love your confidence.
At this school, this is what the Breakfast Club does.
And then my last note is, this is the first movie where the iconic scene for me, the iconic scenes, because there's a couple to me that stick out, are at the end. Not in the first 5 minutes. Yeah. So, I mean, obviously, like, the fist is, like, the last scene. But also, to me, what sticks out from this movie is when they're all dancing in the library.
The dancing, the, like, over-exaggerated, Yeah,
all their, like, 80s dance moves. That whole scene is what is iconic to me. And for it being at the end was so weird, because it's always at the beginning for the last couple of movies that we've seen. So, big switch up with the Breakfast Club.
Stick it through the end if you wanted to actually understand the Breakfast Club, unlike most other movies where it's just 5 minutes in, saw the scene, good to go home.
Move on. All right, those are my notes.
Yeah. So in my notes, I had the "Don't You Forget About Me." Obviously, mentioned that being a big, I think the iconic Breakfast Club song. I wonder what Anthony Michael Hall's up to these days. I can't see him without thinking of that stupid AT&T commercial every single time.
So just quick backstory. When we first started dating, we were watching, was it the OC?
I think it was the OC.
On some streaming service back in like 2015.
And CW or something.
And every single commercial on it was like an AT&T commercial.
The same AT&T
And it would start off, have you ever wondered what Anthony Michael Hall's up to? And it was the first thing I thought when the movie started.
Every single time. I cannot see him without thinking of that stupid commercial.
All I think about.
Yeah, we'll link that in a short or something.
Yes.
I loved the sign, not really related to the rest of the movie, but the sign in the beginning that just said hackers will be expelled. And I also just wonder how much of an issue were hackers in 1985? Like, the World Wide Web wasn't really established. Like
the internet was born in 91.
Yeah. They're like, what really were these hackers doing? I guess hacking into their own school database, something from that. I don't know. Just, I kind of want to look into see like what the capabilities of the computers were at the time in the 80s. That is the nicest school library that I've ever seen.
It's definitely the biggest library that I've ever seen.
I only went to my school library like twice ever, but it was 2 stories. There was just so much going on.
Yeah, I should have
made a note. A big open area, all like
What is that sculpture?
Yeah, a big art sculpture in the middle of it.
I mean, I just feel like there has to be some kind of backstory to this giant stone thing in the middle of your library
that they could sit on in the middle of the scene,
and dance around. And
it just seemed way larger. I guess before, I would say before computers, but obviously there were computers there. Before people just use the internet to do research and read everything, you needed a big over-the-top library with a bunch of desks to check out books and do research.
That'll be like a card catalog.
The Dewey Decimal System. Yeah. Just seemed way larger than any school library we have around here.
For sure. I will say when he was mixing up the card catalog, and not that I ever had to use that in my lifetime, but it just like really stressed me out. I was like, but like all that's mixing stuff up. Like I just really
how are you going to find the books?
Right?
Lost forever.
I did notice like in the library, the scene seeing like card catalog, and it was like A through L, M through whatever, and just thinking like we never lived in that time. I don't even know.
The Dewey Decimal System in school. Did you ever have to learn that?
Loosely, like I think in elementary school.
And in the time I was just like, oh, this is so obvious. I couldn't tell you really anything about the Dewey Decimal System now, other than the fact that like it was a system for organizing books in a library. But
now you just go to the library and you're like, I'm looking for this.
That now I kind of want to, not for this pod, but I just going to like do a quick recap on the Dewey Decimal System.
Yeah.
Wow.
It's a very loose memory, like way in the back of my brain that I have to really think about.
Yeah. I noted that this felt like felt like a play. The eat my shorts scene was very much the eat my shorts. And he said it so emphatically, but it still looked like it was something that should have been like dubbed over on like a eat shit or something scene.
I just really wish that we'd been recording our faces when that scene came on. His face was amazing. He was so excited.
Each time he said it, so what a weird thing to say to someone.
Are you going to start saying that now?
Probably.
Oh, Jesus. I want to see in what application you feel like that phrase
probably like
is the right
least appropriate time. So we'll find out.
Oh, jeez.
Why get stoned in the middle of this whole detention thing? I feel like if you're gonna get stoned like beforehand and or after, and leaving your drugs at school just seems like it's a really risky for no apparent reason thing. Obviously, it's wrapped up in baggies, but
were drug dogs a big thing?
Yeah, I don't know when drug dogs like first started becoming prevalent, but just seemed unnecessarily risky and kind of silly. I don't know. I could have seen him getting like stoned as hell before, maybe he was before he got there, and then just been like, well, it might wear off, partway through, but whatever.
Yeah,
crazy.
I hadn't thought about that, but it does make sense.
I thought the part where Emilio Estevez had his like big moody dance punch karate scene, it felt very much like Mac from It's Always Sunny, where he was just like doing the karate part.
And he's like,
it was a cross between
jumping over the bookshelves and everything.
It was a cross between that and High School Musical.
Yes, like if Mac was in High School Musical.
100%. It just felt
not Troy Bolton from High School Musical as Mac, like Mac from It's Always Sunny. And singing a song like he's in High School Musical.
Yeah, it just felt very awkward and unnecessary that he's doing a bunch of like punching and karate things and a bunch of backflips while he's acting all angry. Well, he just came out of like this hot boxed library room.
In the foreign languages room.
Yeah.
Yeah, that was weird.
Just made no sense, but just guess just trying to show like his inner fight his inner struggle with himself. Noted that it felt like they were stripping off layers over time as they were in the library. They had like 19 layers of clothing on. I'm like, those people are going to overheat.
I'm so glad that we both realized that. I've just like, it occurred to me like when they were literally leaving the school and saying goodbye to each other, where I was like, this is a lot deeper than we thought. Cause I mean, we made note of all the layers and I just thought it was just
Peeling
fashion
back
choice,
layers.
but they were like Shrek. They were like onions. They were just taking their layers off.
Yeah.
Everybody loves parfait.
The social pressure and regret. I don't know what I made this note for.
I mean, I think that just in general,
Yeah.
high school puts a lot of pressure on you to whatever box you somehow find yourself in within the first year. You kind of just have to stay in it.
Yeah. I don't really know where I was going with that one.
We can cycle back if you have it.
What happened to them being like afraid to make a sound in the beginning? They're so afraid to like make any sound, or that the principal's going to keep leaning in. And by the end, they're like blasting music from the radio.
Right?
They're
The
like
record player?
smoking weed, dancing, singing, doing everything. To, like, did they?
That
know
made me
he
uncomfortable
just,
when
like,
they started
left?
blasting the record player. I was like, aren't you supposed to be quiet? What are we doing here?
Yeah, they really kind of reverse course on that really quickly. And I don't know what reason they had to think that he was not going to come barging in at any second. And then I want to look back and count because it said the essay had to be 1,000 words.
I had some issues with that too.
And at the end, they're reading the essay about the sign to the Breakfast Club. I want to know if anyone's going back to count how many words that essay was.
I'm
doubt it was 1,000.
certain.
But I just want to know.
The internet's been around for
I
a
hope
while.
it's exactly 1,000.
But my bigger thing was we grew up in the time of computers. That like if we had to know a word count, you just hit the word count button in Microsoft Word and you just know how many words your essay is.
It showed the word count at the bottom, which is cool.
Was he expecting them to just sit there and count to 1,000?
I mean, they had 7 hours to write something out.
8
and count.
hours.
Yeah.
I don't know. It just made me really think about a different time. I mean, also disclaimer, my high school, we had laptops back in 2000. I've had a laptop in school since 6th grade. So
back in my day.
Back in your day was different than back in my day because I've had laptops since middle school. That just thinking about having to count. Did you ever have to, like in high school, have a word count on your essays? I don't think I ever had a word count. It was always maybe like a 2-page
double space or and
double
teachers
space size
haven't quite
12.
Figured out
Like
the whole 1.5 space versus 3x space. If you really wanted to change those things, get around what you needed to.
But was it ever words? I mean, words probably makes more sense than a page count.
I think there might have been times that it was words, but I think for the most part it was 2 pages double spaced.
Yeah.
Sometimes I had more to say and I'd adjust the margins. Sometimes I had less to say and I'd adjust the margins. So.
Oh, those tricks. Do what you got to do to get your page count. We'll see how many words my Breakfast Club essay is when I find it.
Yeah. Ooh.
Is it 1,000? Ooh, that'll be so deep if it's actually 1,000. That's crazy.
0 chance.
And then I do have one more note because I noticed it at the beginning that I do love how they set up all of the kids by having their parents drop them off, because it's such a movie about thinking about your personal experiences in your life and how that affects who you are and who you feel like you need to be and who you're pushing yourself to be. And to have Molly Ringwald's dad giving her sushi and being like, oh, you don't have to worry about what your mom says, and seeing that there's some kind of feud between her and her parents, and that's got to be
who's gonna bring sushi to somewhere though that you don't have a refrigerator?
I wasn't even gonna go into that because that's another level. And seeing Emilio Estevez's dad being oh, you're so strong, you're the jock, and hyping him up, and Brian's mom being you're not going to do this again, and getting out of that, and then Allison's parents just dropping her off and pulling away without saying anything to her, and Judd Nelson just walking into the school by himself. That I love how they set up each of the characters, and I feel like that was without being overly obnoxious, especially at the beginning of the movie, because you don't even. If you've never seen the movie, you don't know what it's about. It's just such a subtle way to set up each of these characters so quickly.
Because in the beginning, he was coming from the front entrance of the school, and in the end, he's walking through the football facility, which looks like the opposite side of the school, maybe.
I don't know. But also, why does he even show up? Why does he even come? If his parent, it'd be one thing for Brian to not show up because his mom is going to drag him by the ear into the school and be like, "You don't do this again." Why does he come?
Afraid his dad would beat him, I guess.
True. But does his dad care?
Who knows?
Yeah.
Maybe dad's looking for a reason to be mad.
Lots of layers.
Mm-hmm.
But it is a good movie. And like, obviously it's so deep, especially when we really talk about it, but it just leaves you with this like cozy feeling.
Maybe they'll make a sequel on Apple TV and everyone will hate it.
Yeah. You can't sequel that.
I could see some station trying to make a sequel though, and it just being terrible.
I know. Yeah, we're in such an age of remakes that
everyone loves nostalgia.
Don't remake this. Just leave it in its little box the way it is.
Either you die a hero or live long enough to see yourself become the villain, right?
Yeah, sure.
All right.
All right, episode 10.
Cheers.
Cheers. See you next week.